Go. All right. So today we're going to be talking all about perennials, and perennials is a very large world. There's a lot of things to cover. So I am maybe going to be generalizing things a little bit. You have any more specific questions, we can always go into it later, or we can talk about it in the garden center or something. Send me an email or whatever. I tried to bring a little bit of everything for everybody from beginners to advanced. So I hope you all find something in here, and it's my goal that you'll be able to feel a little more confident in getting out there and putting some perennials in your garden. So starting with the basics, perennials, they live more than 2 years in the garden. They have many different colors and textures and can be the backbone of incredibly stunning landscapes. They come back year after year, and they just get more and more gorgeous as they age. You do not have to replant a perennial every year. They pop right back up come spring. They include things that look like small shrubs, flowers, grasses, herbs. All of these things can help enhance the biodiversity in the garden, which just means a little bit of everything. So we're going to be exploring perennials and their significance in the garden, as well as the different practices to help keep them happy and alive. First, I wanted to start with just some basic verbiage of perennials, just so we're all on the same kind of page. When I'm saying stems or shoots, I'm referring to the top growth of the plant. The crown is the center growth point of all things from the plant. Roots, everything below the soil. The taproot is referred to the incredibly long main root that drought tolerant plants mostly will have to help tap into that extra water storage. I may say herbaceous, and this is referring to plants with the soft green shoots. They die pretty completely back in the wintertime. Semi-woody or woody, these things have more dark, dense stems that they just kind of die back to the stems rather than the crown. And evergreen or semi-evergreen, these are things that look nice most of the year round. So why would I want a perennial in my garden? What's the benefit of that? They require less maintenance and resources. You have to water a lot less. You have to look at them a lot less than things like annuals or vegetables. Their deep roots improve soil structure and prevent erosion. So it gives your soil something to hold on to. And their root system, they're long-term, so they very much penetrate that soil and stay there until they die, and then they replenish the soil with their roots as they decompose in there. It's really great to incorporate them as it helps promote sustainable gardening practices, and understanding long-lived plants is key to creating sustainable and vibrant gardens. Sustainable, just something you don't have to work super hard to achieve. Perennials provide great habitat and food for many bugs and animals in our gardens. Their continuous blooms provide lots of food for beneficial insects, help support biodiversity. And understanding their importance fosters sustainable, thriving gardens for plants and wildlife. So our garden is not just a space for us. When we create something like that, we're inviting the bugs and the animals around us to come enjoy it too, whether we like it or not. So we're going to get into a little bit of the essentials of the perennial care. Keeping up on it helps the longevity of the plant and its all around performance. I like to say that understanding their plant placement is key to their success in the garden, because you want it to be happy where it's at and you don't want to have to work too hard to make it happy where you want it. Picking the correct spot can reduce watering as well as feeding. But keeping up on that watering, feeding, and pruning is the secret sauce to making your plant look incredible through the whole year when it's in season. So a little bit about plant placement. As I said, it's incredibly important to place your plants appropriately in the garden. The happiest plants live in an environment that most closely mimics their native homes. So that means in sun exposure, moisture content, and soil types. That's why PNW natives do great in our areas, because they've adapted to our area. A lot of these ornamentals that we use come from different parts of the world where they maybe get more summer rain than we do here, which is why you need to provide maybe some more summer irrigation for plants like that. Choose plants based on your personal garden's characteristics, as well as what you like and what you want it to bring to the garden. How much are you willing to manipulate your garden? Do you want to water at all during the summer? It is our Chenard's motto, right plant, right place. This minimizes your effort and maximizes the plant's efficiency. So some things to note here. If you've ever looked at a perennial tag, you know it says the type of sun in there, full sun, part sun. This is up in the right-hand corner, a breakdown of what that means. If it says full shade, you're looking at having 2 hours or less of direct sunlight touching the leaves. Full sun, 6 or more hours of direct sunlight. And it is also important to note that it is kind of relative to your area. You know, our 6 hours is a little softer and a little more delicate than California or Texas 6 hours. And the zones, you find those on the back of the tags as well. This refers to the winter hardiness of your plant and the lows that it can withstand in the garden. Normally they're in USDA zones for our area. Sometimes you'll see something referred to in a sunset zone, which is a little different, but normally we sell plants in the PNW plants for USDA zones.
What zone did you say? What are we now?
We are here in the Willamette Valley. We are kind of a swinging one. I like to say we're in a zone 7, which means our average low for the winter was only about as 10 degrees. But if you've lived here for any sort of time, you know that it can swing into 0 or the negatives, not often, but every once in a while. And then you can see death happen in the garden. But sometimes we have very moderate winters as well, and we don't hardly see anything lower than 20. So if you're really looking to get a very cold hardy plant, I like to say look for something in a 6 zone, but 7 is pretty reliable for our area. And if you're on the coast, your winter coldness is, you know, much warmer than it is here. And if you're east of the Cascades, it gets significantly colder over there. So it's just something you have to think about specific to your area and your plans. You know, if you love that plant, but it's a zone 8, so it might die and you don't think it's worth the money, maybe you pass on it in favor of something that's more of a zone 6. If you love it and it's worth it and you're like, oh, it's worth the heartbreak if it dies in 10-degree weather. And sometimes you can provide protection to those things too and help them baby them through the winter. Again, all about the amount of effort you're willing to put into your garden and manipulate the environment. So again, right plant, right place, and this includes design. So I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you a few design tips here, some of my favorites. The power of 3, it's just a visually pleasing number. They teach you that in art, and I don't know the psychology behind it, but it's just a pleasing number. Plant things in threes. Use the color wheel to your advantage. Complementary colors are considered things that are opposite on the color wheel. Analogous are next to each other. Both of those things are very visually pleasing to the eye. Use textures to your advantage. Things aren't always going to be in bloom, so if you pay attention to the foliage, you can help draw the eye to linger and create a little more interesting of the areas. Sizing and tiering is really important. It helps enhance that visual interest and flow, but also helps you maximize, you know, your space, the utilization of your space. Another very important thing to our area is seasonal appeal. Most of the things that are stunning here in the summer die back to sticks in the winter. So you gotta pay attention to that as you're creating your garden. Think about things that are evergreen, sporadically place them in your perennial garden, so when everything goes to sleep, you have something to look at. And it just creates a different, ever-changing, you know, feel to your landscape. I like this picture here because I feel like it really incorporates all of those concepts. You can see the rule of three. There's three little, I don't know if you can see my mouth. You can't. There's the three little spiky things. They're playing with the color wheel there. You see the blues and the purples next to each other. And they have a little evergreens mixed in there. Most of what you see right there is going to die back come winter time. However, they've like evenly spaced these little evergreens to give some sort of visual interest, as well as the tall bark, which you don't often think of sticks as being visually pleasing, but they can be. I just plop this color wheel in here. Something to think about. And then roots in dirt. How to get your plant in there. Know your soil and the supplies you may need. I recommend using fertilizers as well as a root stimulator at planting to help them really get off on a good foot. Here in the Willamette Valley, our native soil is incredibly high in clay content. This means that it is very high in nutrient and water capabilities. However, it's very stingy, the clay is, and won't let the plants accept that nutrients. So if you use amendments, it helps break up how hard that clay is holding on to those nutrients and makes it more acceptable to the plants. Potting soils are what you want to use if you're putting things in pots. Just keep in mind that plants you're putting in pots are highly reliant on what you give them. They can't go foraging for water or nutrients. And the nutrients in those pots can tend to deplete after 3 years. So it takes a little bit of more upkeep and care if you're putting things in pots. If you want to talk more about soil amendments, we can do that later. That's one of those things I'm just kind of glossing over through here. We have a lot of really great options here at Chenard. But I recommend to dig your hole as deep as the pot, but twice as wide. So by not digging your hole too deep, if you do dig it too deep, you can see oversaturation issues as the soil settles down. It creates a low spot. And in that low spot, water can collect, which is nice in the summer, but over the winter is when it becomes a problem and the feet of your plant can get oversaturated. So sometimes, especially if you're in a low part of your garden, it might even be beneficial to plant a little shallower to let the water shed off and leave. Just because we have to think, we get so much rain here in the winter time. It's like someone turns on the faucet and doesn't turn it off till summer. This hole you're digging, you're gonna take all of that native soil out, that native clay soil. You'll amend half of it with some sort of amendment, soil building conditioner, garden soil. Lots of things are great for this option, compost. And use that half and half mixture to replant your plant back in. Once you're done with that, we like to see mulch be put on over it. Mulch is, I like to say mulch is a verb as well as an adjective because it's something you do as well as something you use. So it's a little confusing. But in the action of mulching, you're gonna mulch about 1 inch. You can go 2 inches, especially on the more woody stuff. But you want to be a little careful on that. But leave 2 inches away from the collar of the plant as to let the crown breathe. This helps promote moisture retention and reduce weeds. All right, feeding and watering. Perennials have highly varying water needs. Always be mindful of their needs. We recommend maybe having like a drier part of the garden and a wetter part of the garden, kind of keep them a little separate so you don't have to sporadically water in between. You've got your desert plants, things that are used to not getting water during the summer, and your bog plants, things that are used to living with a little bit of wet feet. You can use them to your advantage depending on your location and the environment of your garden. I like to encourage people to water very deeply and infrequently, as this helps create really deep root growth. If you water just the first couple inches of your soil, your plant's not going to feel obligated to grow roots past that couple inches. So if you do a nice deep watering, it will encourage those tap roots to settle in and go foraging for water. I thought I heard something. If somebody online has a question, please put it in the chat bar. It's a little easier to see. If you keep that water also concentrated at the root mass, it helps prevent weeds. Weeds don't grow where the water's not there routinely, or they like to grow a little more where there's water available. This is when drip becomes really nice in the garden because it's just focused right at the root mass of that plant. I recommend using a balanced fertilizer in spring. That's going to be like this all-purpose down here, or the starter fertilizer there. You can also use a liquid mid-spring. The liquid's the granular's really nice and consistent for the plant, very consistent food for about 3 months. The liquid is a very fast uptake of the plant. So if you have to do a big mid-season prune, you can always liquid feed it and that'll help it right away to push more blooms. I also like to recommend the root stimulator at planting as well as in the fall. And this is a very light fertilizer that helps stimulate the roots and can help the plant settle in and get ready for the winter, help it winterize over. You can use that on trees and shrubs as well. It's good all over the garden. Regular deadheading promotes continuous blooms on your plants. If you are looking to have highly blooming plants with the continuous all summer long blooms, it is beneficial to get in there and do some deadheading, as it helps the plant think, I need to create more blooms rather than hold on to the old ones left on the plant. As they go dormant, you are going to want to prune them in the garden to help set the pace for the new growth in the spring. You don't want them to have to fight the old stems that are left there. You want them to be able to just easily grow right into their space. We recommend doing this late fall, early winter. If you do it too early, you might encourage it to rebloom again, which sometimes happens. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you want it to go to sleep for winter. Here's some other winter care. So again, the cleanup, remove any of the dead foliage and debris. This does a really great job of preventing pests and diseases from overwintering in your garden, and just as well as improving the garden's appearance. I like to throw the little caveat in there that our Oregon native bees like to nest in loose sticks, empty bare soil, and long perennial stalks. So don't feel bad about the mess you leave behind in your garden for the winter, because it's for the bees. You have a good excuse. And there is like over 500 different varieties of native bees to Oregon. It's not just about the honeybee. Mulching, it does a lot for us in the garden. It helps prevent pests and disease as well, but it also helps insulate the soil through winter, regulate the soil temperature, and retain moisture. Good mulching materials include purely compost, soil building conditioner, our Harvest Supreme, garden soil. You can use things like bark mulch, shredded leaves, straw, or pine needles. With those latter ones, I like to warn maybe a little bit that they're kind of in an active state of decomposition if they're not already composted before you put them in the garden. Things like pine needles, bark mulches, and shredded leaves, which means they're changing, their chemistry's changing, and as they decompose, they can eat kind of nutrients out of the soil. So sometimes if you use heavy bark mulches, you might have to feed a little more because they have a nitrogen negative quality in the garden. I like to recommend people using fully composted material. It's been set to age for a little while, so it's nice and available. All the nutrients are available for the plant. So you're gonna want to protect your tender plants. Tender perennial plants that are borderline hardy in our climate zone may need additional protection. These are the zone 7 plants, zone 8. This could involve creating a simple frame around the plant and covering it with burlap or frost cloth. We carry frost cloths. Sometimes it can just be as simple as a sheet over the plant. It can mean life or death for it. When we have those, like we had in January this year here, it looks like that cold snap out of seemingly nowhere, and it just kind of destroyed a lot of things in people's gardens and a lot of trees. Sometimes something simple can just help it get through that. Watering, it's not something we really have to think about in our winter time around here. However, it is a good idea to ensure the plant is adequately watered when the ground freezes. Plants can still lose moisture, especially in periods of dry weather and strong winds. Here in the Willamette Valley, we don't see our ground freeze too hard for too long, but it does happen. And here at the garden center, all the things are in pots and above ground, which means our soils are a little more likely to freeze hard because they're not protected by the earth. And so we always have to make sure to water very well before a hard freeze event to prevent issues with our plants. If you have things in pots, this is a little more applicable, as if it's in the ground, it's getting rained on most of the winter anyway. So herbaceous, we talked a little bit about that earlier. Those are the soft shoots and stems of the plants. They're gonna die back in the fall. You can cut those ones 3 to 6 inches. And they'll come back in the springtime. You can leave them a little longer if you want for the perennials or the pollinators. The semi-woody to woody stuff, you're gonna wanna cut more at that 6 to 8 inch range, leaving a little bit more of it. If it's a shrub, it's gonna need more than 8 inches. But the semi-woody perennials, 6 to 8 inches is a good bet. Pests and disease, this is the fun one. So pests and disease, they affect the perennial growth, causing discoloration, stunted growth, and reduced flowering, just overall reducing our enjoyment of the plant. Vigilance, proactive management are vital for health and longevity in the garden. So the sooner you catch it, the better. And I always say prevention is the key. The happier you can make that plant, the easier it is for it to fight pests and diseases. Willamette Valley, we're incredibly high in moisture. This means we have a high increase in fungal and bacterial issues related to moisture. So that's something you should kind of keep thinking about as you're planting. Planting things spaced apart and allowing airflow through can help prevent these issues, as well as staying up to date on your mulching. Common pests may attack perennials. You'll see things like aphids, slugs, spider mites, and beetles. Again, healthy plants fight these pests themselves. But they can often use help. So neem, insecticidal soap, and spinosad are good bets. It's always a good idea to know what you're fighting, because sometimes like beetles can be a little more difficult to get past their hard shells than like a soft aphid. So if you have any questions, you can always bring in pictures or little samples. We do pest IDs here at the store. It's a lot of fun for us. As you're spraying, always be aware of your flowers and heat. Do not poison your pollinators. If you spray your flowers, you can poison your pollinators. And if you do it on a very hot day, midday, you can burn your plant. Deer is a major issue in our area. Nothing is deer proof. We recommend using deterrents as well as using resistant varieties. Deer resistant varieties. We'll talk a little bit more about deer prevention in a little bit. I created this little Venn diagram thing here that I really like to use. It looks a little confusing, I suppose, but if you're familiar with Venn diagrams, each circle where it connects shares that trait. If it's not connecting, it is in on its own. So let me try to break this down a little bit. If you're seeing pest issues, you're going to be seeing things potentially like webbing, yellow dotting, sticky dew, tunnel boring, holes, white fluff, or small bugs. If you're seeing disease, you'll be seeing brown dead tissue spotting, brown streaking through the tissue, melting, or white powdered dusting. What pest and disease have in common is deformed new growth. If you're seeing environmental issues, these are things that like the environment is causing, things that we're causing. You can see things like legginess, reaching, browning of tips, complete thorough browning, which is an indicator of chemical burn. Things that environmental and disease share is tissue scabbing or smelly soil, which soil should smell good, like dirt, not like a dirty sink of dishes. And you'll see in common with pests and environmental issues is that browning of the tips. For all three, they all three share defoliating. You can see the leaves starting to leave the plant. Wilting or sad leaves, they just kind of do the meh. Yellowing leaves, stunted new growth, or even so much as death. This doesn't encompass everything. It's just kind of a general guide to help, because you got to figure out what's happening to your plant, and it kind of helps you figure out if it's a pest, a disease, or something that you're causing, or the environment is. You need help, we can help you figure it out. So there are a lot of practical benefits to incorporating perennials into your landscape. They can work for us in our garden and do a lot more for us than just look pretty. And here in a second, we're gonna go over the different themes of plants and some of my favorite perennials for those themes. Through different themes, we will discover our most popular and beloved perennial plants that have won us with their beauty and charm. If you're doing your own research in the future too, I like to recommend our plant finder tool on our website. It breaks down all the care needs and characteristics of plants. You can search it by name. It'll pop it up. So deer resistant. Again, nothing is deer proof. Those little ones will browse everything and everything as they learn. We recommend buying the deer resistant varieties as well as using deterrents for, especially on new plants. If you're adding something new into the garden, they're kind of like cats. Something new, let me go check it out. You know, using different kinds of deterrents for your area might help too if deer are really an issue in your yard. You can use a perimeter smell deterrent around the edge of your garden or your lawn, which will help make your whole area just kind of not fun for the deer because it smells funny. And then you can also use like a taste deterrent on your plants. So when they make it past that smell perimeter and they go to taste that plant, it's spicy. Some of them have cayenne in them, and the deer labels that plant in your yard as spicy, and it doesn't want to come back and try it again. The trick is to label that plant, you know, as soon as it gets into the garden or when the new ones come along. If you got some locals, they figure it out eventually. Some of the deer resistant qualities include strong smells on the foliage and flowers, things like mint, lavender, rosemary. If you can smell it or taste it, they can smell it or taste it and they don't like it. Yeah, fibrous textured shoots, my bad. Fibrous textured shoots and leaves. So anything that's thicker, chunkier, just tend to be a little less satisfying to a deer. And I also like to throw the ability to take on a strong pruning because they're going to try it. It's just going to happen. One of my personal favorites is the Russian sage, the Perovskia. It loves full sun. It's incredibly drought tolerant. Depending on the variety, it can be 2 to 4 feet long. Perovskia really won my heart last year because I did some traveling in Eastern Oregon to go visit family. And east of the Cascades, they use a lot of it, like in their city landscapes. So it goes all summer long, incredibly prolific, long-lasting blooms, and the pollinators go crazy for it. It has incredibly extensive root systems to allow for that drought tolerance, which makes it great for erosion control as well. It's incredibly adaptable and low maintenance. Spurge or euphorbia. Very unique, maybe even a little weird, almost out of this world looking flowers on it there. They're very drought tolerant as well. Some of the varieties of these are evergreen, which is really nice. And some of them get very large in the 5-foot zone where some can stay smaller. They take a good pruning, they take it very well. They even like it. However, their sticky sap they ooze when they get cut is an irritant to our skin.
That's a bad problem. I bought a house with those in there and I yanked them all out because I don't want to be worried about that. You know, I tried cutting some into a vase and then I touched my face and I yanked them out.
Yeah, it can be very irritating. Some people can have negative reactions to it. However, it makes it incredibly deer resistant. Again, adaptable and low maintenance. And that's pretty much true for all the drought tolerant things. Wild indigo or baptisia, full to part sun. drought tolerant. However, it's adaptable to anything as long as it doesn't have standing water. 3 to 4 feet in size. It's a little bit of a low, almost spreading type. Flowers are great for cutting and drying. The leaves are split into threes, which gives it a pretty unique foliage texture. One really cool thing I found about it is that it's part of the legume family, which means it's actually nitrogen fixing, which means it can grab nutrients like nitrogen from the air and put it into a usable format in the soil. It's also tolerant of the salt, making it a great coastal plant. Thrives in full sun. Again, full sun is a somewhat of a relative term for location. Our full sun is not California full sun. In the Willamette Valley, our full sun is 6+ hours. I want to say in California, it's like 4. It's such harsh sun. You'll find that the evening sun is much harsher and more brutal on your delicate plants than the morning sun. Things that are yellow or have thin whipped foliage may be more susceptible to getting sun scald in the garden. Sometimes the yellow things can be benefiting from some evening shade just to help. Some of my favorite full sun ones is the poppy. Full sun, part sun, drought tolerant. They stay pretty small, 18 to 24 inches. Their flowers, spikes just kind of shoot up above the mass. Large variety of pinks, reds, and oranges. Great source of nectar and pollen for pollinator friends.
All poppies perennial?
I don't think not all of them, but a good chunk of them are. There are some annual ones.
Seeded one.
Do they just flower like one time? They do their flower and that's you're done.
Yeah, it's a pretty short flowering period earlier in the summer, and then the foliage goes dormant as well. So it's good to plant with more late summer bloomers or things that show a little better later in the summer. We have a really beautiful one planted out back in our perennial garden that looks similar to the pink one here. And it's already done. It's so magnificent. It's just so in your face, and then that hot sun hits, and then it just goes to sleep for the rest of the summer. Guara is another one of my personal favorites. Full to part sun, incredibly drought tolerant. Depending on the size, 18 to 24 inches. It has very long flower spikes that shoot up as well. It's also called bee blossom. And the hummingbirds and butterflies really like it. I really like it. Again, when cities use it on that little hell strip between the sidewalk and the street, it really says something to me. And the city of Sweet Home uses this as a sidewalk plant. And it looks gorgeous.
Is this one you prune back in the winter, like 3 to 6 inches?
Yes. Guara, I like guara because it actually looks really good going into the fall. It kind of has a long end stretch to its attractiveness. Coneflower, echinacea, we've all heard of this one. Some people say it's not very deer resistant because they like to snack on them. They are edible flowers, but the plant itself's pretty deer resistant, the flowers aren't. However, there's a huge variety of purple, pinks, reds, yellows, whites. It's just like whatever color you need, there's basically one in an echinacea. Great source of nectar and pollen for our pollinator friends. Huge bloom period. And the Angustifolia, Padilla, and Purpurea are known to have medicinal qualities. You know, you buy the echinacea teas at the store and stuff. So.
I've had a problem with, it seems like except for the one on the right, which is kind of the original color maybe, is it? A lot of the other ones seem like they're hybrids and they're gone, like the next year, it's really frustrating and expensive. Am I doing something wrong?
I think I've heard that the breeding of the echinaceas can cause them to be a little more finicky. I'm not sure what causes their death, if it's like a winter oversaturation issue, or if they shouldn't just be timing out on you and giving up on life. But I have heard people having issues with echinacea like that before.
Okay.
Especially between the crosses of the Ecbeckia and the Rudbeckia types of coneflowers, I've heard are a little more finicky. I just love how pretty they are. Thrives in shade. So again, less than 2 hours of direct light. Part shade is 2 to 4 hours of light. That morning sun is much more delicate than in the evening. The problem with these shadier areas is our humidity and moisture can tend to be higher in these areas due to the sun not drying it out, and sometimes this can cause fungal issues. So just think about airflow in your shade garden. Hellebores are incredibly popular, mostly through the winter time, because they are the winter rose. They bloom in the dead of winter. They're really cool because they have evergreen foliage. They hold on to their leaves through the summer. They maybe don't look totally thrilling in the summer, but they're holding on to something. And then in the winter time is when they really come to.
When should you move those around? Like, when should they be moved, if they've gotten into an inconvenient place?
I would probably move them fall or spring. Spring's probably the best time. Very diverse looking flowers, from whites to blacks. Colby, our greenhouse buyer, she is just madly in love with hellebores. If you come here in the winter time, we've got a very great selection. Brennera, I am in love with Brennera just because of its silver foliage and its blue flowers. I feel like blue can be a little more difficult type of color to find in the garden. And that foliage is just stunning without the flowers. It likes moist, well-drained soil, full to part shade. It's great as a planted in mass or just used as a standalone plant. The bees and the butterflies really love it. Coral bells, it has a nice little small shrubbery in that 15-inch zone, and then it sets off with these really tall spikes that's easier for the pollinators to find of flowers. They spread really great. They've got the rhizomous roots, which means they're more fibrous, and they spread from that crown through those rhizomous roots. And they're all around a pretty low maintenance plant. Some of them can even hold on to their color into the fall and winter a little longer. Drought tolerant, our Willamette Valley receives little to no rain in the summertime. I feel like this thunderstorm we just had is the first time I've seen rain here since I've lived here. This means that you need reliable irrigation, whether that's you watering with a hose or you getting drip system or a sprinkler out. If you are not reliable or you cannot be consistent, you might want to pick more drought resistant varieties that can handle the inconsistency. Drought tolerant does not mean never needs water. New plants may need to be babied through their first or second year, and mature drought tolerant plants will need very little water to get through the heat of the drought. One of my favorite resources is University of California, Davis, UC Davis. is doing plant irrigation drought tolerant trials for the last several years, and they provide a lot of really great information on how well plants perform with smaller and smaller amounts of water. They label their best plants blue ribbon plants. So those are kind of fun to look at. Some of my personal favorites is the Rudbeckia, the black-eyed Susan. We get a lot of people in looking specifically for the Rudbeckia. It's drought tolerant, very long blooming period from early summer through mid-fall. The pollinators love it. You can have really tall 3-foot varieties or short 18-inch varieties, which gives it a lot of different places you could put it in the garden. And when they're planted in mass, they really have a dramatic effect. Lavender, one of my favorites. It's incredibly drought tolerant and thrives off of neglect. They really don't like being in pots. I don't know if anyone's noticed that. I had a lavender I kept in a pot for years and was like, what's wrong with you? Why can't I make you happy? And I finally planted it in the ground and it just took off. Highly aromatic, ideal for drying. We all know that. The bees go crazy for it. I love just being able to hear a lavender plant. The smell makes it highly deer resistant. And the great thing about it is it's evergreen or ever silver, sometimes we like to call it. There's lots of different colors from white. This year we had some really cool variegated foliage ones with yellow foliage. And we've got some really cool pink ones right now too. Blanket flower is incredibly drought tolerant as well. Long lasting as a cut flower. Once it loses its leaves, it leaves the little balls on the plant, which is kind of fun looking. And the pollinators love it. The fuzzy hairs make it very drought or deer resistant. And those colors are just quite stunning. So pollinator plants, often characterized by their long bloom periods and the amounts of nectar and pollen in them. Sometimes a very pretty plant can have zero nutrition in it as far as pollinators go. Like sometimes it can be the McDonald's of a plant or something. So when you're planting for pollinators, you want to be a little mindful of the nectar and pollen content. Hummingbirds find themselves attracted to bright colors and ease of access. Things with the trumpet-shaped flower, just easy for them to get their little beaks in there. Butterflies are looking for landing pads and nesting material. They're very delicate and need somewhere to land. However, bees are attractive to the UV light a plant gives off and likes diversity because they every day they have a different preference of what they're looking for. So here's my number one hummingbird plant is the agastache or the hyssop. Incredibly drought tolerant. There's lots of different colors, but what really gets me is its smell. It's incredibly minty smelling, and I love it. It's just a plus that the hummingbirds also love
Does
it.
that bloom long?
It blooms very long, yes. Very prolific. I got an up close picture of just one flower stem there, but they really do a nice little mass of color. Looks like I might have a question. Oh, a person online mentions that they noticed a deer repellent warning against using if bees are in the area. My garden has 1 million bees, so they opted to move the plant in the back versus spraying. I would think that capsaicin would be irritating to bees too. might want to ignore the plant if it smells like garlic, if you were to get one of the garlic smelling ones. I would imagine like the bone meal one, the one you spray around or the spread around the perimeter for smell wouldn't be too irritating to bees. However, I could see ones that you spray directly on the plant, especially if you were to spray it on the flowers, how that would negatively impact a bee. I personally haven't noticed that warning on there before, but I will have to look into it a little more and pay a little closer attention to that. I hadn't thought about that before. Again, if your plant has no flowers on it, it shouldn't affect the bees because the bees aren't really attracted to a plant that doesn't have flowers on it. If you're more worried about repelling the deer than looking at the flowers, you could always cut the flowers and spray the plant. My number one pick for the butterflies is the milkweed or the Asclepia. It's a PNW native here. It likes full to part sun. It likes average to wet soils. That's the thing about it. It's not very drought tolerant. It is critical nesting habitat for monarch butterflies. They use it for creating nests as well as allowing their caterpillars to eat. They can be leggy, so it's greatly paired with shorter plants up front. The extensive root system is great for erosion control, and it can handle some standing water, which makes it great for your more boggy areas. And my number one bee pick that I get excited about is the Joe Pye weed. It looks a lot like the milkweed. However, I think that Joe Pye's more quick growing than the milkweed. The milkweed can take a couple years before it really starts being showy in the garden. That Joe Pye really just kind of takes off immediately. We've got one planted out in our landscape out there, and when it's flowering, the huge amount of diverse bees on there is just flooring to me. Like I said, there's 500 different types of native bees in Oregon, and I swear if you stand there long enough, you can see all of them. The honeybees love it, the native bees love it, everybody loves it, and including me. It's deer resistant, adaptable, and low maintenance. However, it again also it's not too drought tolerant. It likes the average amount of moisture. It's good to pair well with the early season bloomers as it's more late showing. Ours out there is only just starting to bud up. It hasn't even flowered yet. And I had to throw in here, oh, sorry about that, guys. Hold on. Oregon natives. Natives are adapted to our area and our ecosystems, which reduces our need for irrigation and maintenance. And our native birds, insects, and animals have evolved alongside these plants for forever. So if you're looking to plant things for our native pollinators, it's great to go with these ones. And I realize I'm starting to get a little late here, but I'm almost done. If you wanted to leave, you can feel free to go. Don't let me keep you if you have other prior engagements. The Great Camas is my first pick here. Very pretty, comes out in the spring. Full sun to part shade. It likes average to wet soils loves clay with a high preference for alkalinity. It has very tall flower spikes, up to 32 inches, and the rest of it kind of stays small. It'll keep the foliage through the summer, unlike the poppy, which is kind of nice. It's salt tolerant, making it a great coastal plant. Oregon Sunshine is a popular favorite. Very incredibly drought tolerant, full sun to part shade. Bloom spring through fall, host to several butterfly and moth larvae, which is really incredible. As well as the great camas, they can colonize, they can spread, they just take over. It's kind of PNW natives, they just kind of do that. Oop, one more in there. And the Douglas Aster, or the Spiraea douglasii, full sun to part shade. It loves moist soil. Blooms mid to late summer, this beautiful purple spike. Can handle some standing water, making it a great bog plant or around your rising water tables. Just beware that it'll send shoots off. That's kind of how it gets a little obnoxious in the garden. Moving forward, I would like to leave you all with a few thoughts here. That gardens are not just a beautiful and relaxing place to us, but also a functional ecosystem in itself. As gardeners, we have a responsibility to care for and protect our wildlife and pollinators. We directly have an influence on the health and sustainability of their surroundings. Let's continue to cultivate gardens mindfully, creating spaces that are visually stunning, productive, and enriching for all inhabitants. If you'd like to contact me, I got information here. I'd also like to encourage you guys to visit us online. We've got a really awesome website, a cool Instagram.
It's exceptional.
All of these classes are posted to our YouTube page. You can find them all at a later date and find everything Darren's done or that I've done in the past. So, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you making the time.